Hello, good morning, or good afternoon if you're other places.
Morning.
Hey, Yuvraj, it seems you use the fireflies.ai note taker. Are you just sending the bot or are you around? I think he's just sending the bot. I guess I'll be the note taker today, but we want to start rotating this responsibility across the group. Hey, George, you want to take the notes today? You are muted.
All right. Yep, I'm happy to do that today.
Okay, awesome.
Oh.
I guess we can get started. Or maybe wait one more minute.
I think we're ready to go, Keithan. If you want to kick off, I'll take notes.
So the agenda for today, so we are going forward, we have created a backlog of agenda items because I think the spreadsheet was becoming harder for people to add in. So just add yourself to the backlog, or if you can talk about some of those topics that are there in the backlog, definitely let us know. And so we'll try to have this agenda ready at least a few days before or locked a few days before the meeting. And does everybody have access to the meeting doc? Just want to make sure. Yeah, good. I think we can just make everybody probably have access to it. Sometimes that's a problem. You don't know who actually edited something. That's one of the reasons why we haven't given write access. You can always put a comment, and we will add that in. Cool. So today we have three items specifically in the demo, and then a fourth kind of a request and an action for everybody here to do. So let's get started with the first three items. Handing over to Yi to talk about Flytekit with the new release.
Hey, my screen is coming through okay, right? We made a release, I think last Friday. This is for sure the final alpha release for the annotation, the native typing, the Python native typing version of Flytekit that we've been working on. I wanted to specifically call out, I did this, it's listed in the changelog, but I wanted to specifically call out the breaking changes as well. And when I say breaking, it's just minor changes that if you happen to use these things, you'll have to make. But it may not be applicable to everyone. So this cleans up implementation a little bit better on the back end as well, moving the configuration for every single task into its own data class effectively. So instead of just indiscriminately having all the configuration in the task declaration, you put them inside the config object itself. Certain things have been moved inside the Spark context. Things like parallel, I'm not sure what, I'm not too familiar with Spark, but look for it in the Spark context if you can't find it in the session. Task metadata, previously it was a function, we've made it a data class. We think it's a little bit cleaner. Down below, we've also added the workflow metadata as a data class it's available through the decorator args as well. The types have been moved to each to their own subfolder. So this is the way that we'll continue to add the natively supported types, at least if there are any more to come. There was a small bug in the handling of named tuples that were only one element long. So that has been fixed. And I think everyone who uses it should read this section as well when you get the chance. This is important because the registration process has long been, we felt a little bit awkward, and now we're getting to the point where we're trying to clean it up as much as possible. So there will be more changes in this regard in the next couple weeks. So currently you have to run, you always have to run two things. One, to compile your code down to protobufs. And the second thing is to actually register those protobufs. We're taking out certain settings, certain values from those protobufs, and then basically waiting until registration, actual network call time to assign them. And this way, anyone can produce any artifact, any Flyte artifact, and then give it to someone else. And under a completely different Flyte installation, you can again re-register. The changes that we're going to continue to make pertains to the top part. Currently, our recommendation is that this is run inside the container. That's pretty slow and leads to poor iteration time. So we are adding some more configuration options to, when I say we, I mean Katrina, is adding some more configuration options to this, to the command that will allow you to specify everything that you need to specify outside of the container. And it'll also work with fast registration and all that. Beyond that, because if you take a look at this PR, it's entirely new code effectively, and it touches it's PR number 136. It touches the old code in very, very few places. So the alpha and beta moniker for us has always been, alpha really means API changes to the user, things that would break existing user code. And beta is more like we're testing whether or not the old code that's currently on master is compatible and will break. So we're thinking of releasing beta probably by the end of this week and removing the entirely making an official release very, very shortly thereafter, maybe another week, just for testing that the current code isn't breaking. Along with that, I'll update this doc again with the final changes. That's just a proposal where we laid out the spec effectively. And we will, something else I wanted to say. We'll be better about laying out all the tasks. And hopefully once it's merged, we'll have a more concrete list, smaller list of things. Currently, it's all just in a Google Doc of features that we want to add, bug fixes and whatnot, and the community at large can collaborate better. So there'll probably be flight issues. And I think that was it.
So summarizing, we are in alpha. We might introduce breaking changes, but we plan to go into beta later this week, or maybe early next week. And at that point, we are saying essentially that Flytekit new API is stable, and we will maintain that API going forward, no matter what, till the next big change, of course. And I think we want to actually relatively shorten the timeline between beta to final release, and that's what we covered. So I would recommend everybody to try out the new Flytekit. You just have to do pip install Flytekit 0.16a2. So that's the alpha 2. And the examples are in Flyte Cookbook. They are published to read the docs. Please go through them. I think ergonomically, and this is my opinion, I find it really, really easy to work with and very easy to extend. So please definitely give it a try and let us know. I think the next person is Anand. He wants to share about like the node-to-node relationship and what's the status with that, and give a little more detail about it for the new people.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Ketan. Let me share my screen. Just confirm if you guys can see my screen. Awesome. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, beautiful. So what I want to talk about today is we have rolled out a new event version within Flyte when the propeller actually sends events back to admin. Why did we do that? The first main reason was that our current modeling of the events, for example, let's say if you are looking at an execution and you click on an execution, you look at all the nodes inside the execution. The layout here is actually incorrect. Whatever we show here, this layout directly maps to the data which is stored in the admin database. Now we have three issues going on. So the first thing is we actually were storing the data in the Flyte admin in a wrong format. Number two, Propeller was actually not sending the correct relationship and so on. Now, before I go on to explain what the issue is, let me actually show you the difference between the correct one and the incorrect one. So this is the one after the fix. So technically you can see that there is actually the node 0 and node 1 were actually within the parent node 1. So this was a sub workflow, and the sub workflow actually had other nodes. This was actually not modeled in the current event version. So actually this was how we were. There were a lot of bugs. For example, let's say if you had a sub workflow with the same node ID with a node in the parent, essentially we will just overwrite it. So everything will run correctly in the backend, but when you see it in the Flyte admin, you will actually have only one execution for the node ID. And also in the UI, the guy which writes the last, or the node which executes last, will only be displayed. Everything else will be swallowed, and so on. So these are the main fundamental issues that were going on. So what we did was we introduced a new event version. So essentially, if you want to add the event version, you have to enable it in Flyte admin. So here's the way it works. If you update your code to the latest, you will have all the bits of Propeller and admin, but you will not have the fix. For you to get the fix, you will have to upgrade the event version to the new event version. And I will be showing more information of that. So the way of doing it is you have to enable it in Flyte admin. And once you enable it in Flyte admin, what happens is we would update the event version in the Flyte workflow meta. So this actually goes into the Propeller's custom resource. So as you update the admin, all the new executions that you launch will have the new event version. So think of it this way. So essentially what happens is that everything that you have run in the past, their UI, that UI will not change. But the moment you update the new event version, every future executions will now start showing up in the correct format. So I can actually show you some of the changes, but the main thing that we did was uh, in the past, the biggest issue was that in the database, we did not have a concept of a node being a parent node to another node. So we had this concept in the workflow structure in a static flow, but in an execution format, when you run it, you cannot say that, hey, I actually am a child of another node when you're executing. So for that, what we did was we simply just add a child relationship. But once we did that, we actually found out that there was another functionality that went missing due to this change, which is that within, let's say if you are running a sub workflow, the entire sub workflow can have retries. So let's say you have a workflow, and within the workflow you have a sub workflow, and you say that, hey, I want retry of 3, which means that let's say the execution of the sub workflow fails the first 2 times, you will run the 3rd time and you can succeed. But in the UI, you actually want to know which nodes were part of the first run, which node executions are part of the second run, and which node executions are part of the 3rd run. Previously, what we did was we used the concept of task execution ID to actually do this arbitrary grouping. But in the new world, what we have done is we introduced a concept called as retry groups and so on. So essentially, each execution of the entire group, we called as a retry group. And we also pass this metadata from the propeller. So the whole change has been like getting rid of fixing the bug and making sure that the feature parity exists, and also updating the UI. So essentially now the UI also is able to fetch all the data correctly, and so on. So essentially, if there is a node execution, admin sends to the UI that this node is a parent node. And if it is a parent node, the UI will go and fetch all the child executions and so on. So yeah, this is essentially the feature, but you will have to upgrade to the latest versions of Flyte to get the entire thing. Right now at Lyft, we have rolled it out to our users, but we just had to revert it once, mainly because one of our users actually had written custom code trying to fetch all the node executions and manually looking into the node ID and so on. So we are actually trying to just fix that particular issue before rolling it out further. Yeah, but everything is out here, so you can just try it out. So feel free to try out the new event version to get all the latest fixes.
Anand, quick question. Can we just generally make it true for everybody going forward?
We can. Let's just bake it out for a few days. Maybe in the next release, we can just make it add the new event version as the new V1, and so that everyone who is new and who wants to try it out can just get the new version. But the main issue is I want to make sure that we don't find any bugs, because rolling back is not a happy place to be. Rolling back is, you can roll back, but the only issue is that, let's say if you have some custom code, you don't want those new executions to fail. That is the only tricky part. So I just want to bake it out a little bit, and then we can just make it default for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, for people who've just recently joined at Lyft, there are far too many very, very critical workloads running on Flyte, and so we are very careful of rolling out changes. Anything that impacts even a small percentage is regarded as tough to roll out. Anand, anything else? Any questions from anybody? Anand, can you actually point configuration as to where to enable that, and can you put that in the notes?
Yes, I'll do that. So I didn't want to announce the feature because there is the small fix here is that we want to expose the node metadata in Flytekit. So currently the node metadata is not available in Flytekit. So like I'm working on a fix to just add a node metadata field into the Flytekit so that our users can use it instead of hacking it their own way. So once I get that done, essentially I'll just send you all the release notes and so on. So, but the whole thing is very easy. So if you are rolling out your change, just make sure that you are updating the database also, which if I believe your deployment should already do it. And all you have to do is just enable this one event version, and that's it. But again, like I said, maybe in the next release, we'll make this default event version so that you don't even have to do anything. You just have to upgrade, and all the newer executions will be in the right format. So that's the target. The new world would be that everything will be in the newer event version. Because right now what we have both the event versions actively working. We have code for both event version 0 and event version 1, and we don't want to be there because event version 0 is like hacky and wrong. So we actually want to delete all the code from Propeller itself for the older event version, but we just want to bake it and move it slowly before we do that.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody? Probably Spotify. Okay. And Freenome, if you guys are running the new one, I don't know if it actually mainly impacts people who are running sub workflows.
Launch plans and branch nodes. So if you guys have like launch plan caller within your execution, sub workflows, or branch node, these are 3 cases where you will hit it. Because essentially, think of it this way: you have a branch node with the same. No, yeah, these are 3 cases where you will hit it exactly.
Cool. The next one is Prafulla. He's new to our call, so welcome, Prafulla. And he has a small demo. He's been working on Flyte for the last week or so, on and off, and he wants to show something.
Hey, thanks, Ketan. Hey guys. Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this call. So I've been working lately in Flytekit with Ketan and trying to understand how it's trying to solve the ML pipeline problem. So with some of the open source things that are happening, so I wanted to jump in and see how I can contribute to this. So one thing when I was reading about it, like me and Ketan were discussing about how Jupyter is kind of an environment where not Jupyter, but Jupyter Notebooks is the one where most of the like academia and the ML workflows are being written, and it's kind of an interactive environment which people can use it and can test their workflows. And it has been, we are seeing like it's being adapted quite a lot. And the one thing that we don't have currently in Flyte is actually supporting the notebooks directly, because most of this code is embedded inside a JSON. So essentially, when you say this notebook is basically just a JSON which contains like metadata information along with certain code blocks. And I can just quickly show you how exactly the the notebook is structured. So Ketan, can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Okay. Okay, just a second. Okay, let me know if you guys can see my screen. Okay, great. Yeah, so essentially during this time, I'll just go over some of the things that I spoke about, like why we have the use of Jupyter Notebooks. And the one thing that I just went over is it has been used extensively for doing interactive workflows in academia and machine learning. And we want to support this for Flyte. So I'll go over what are the things that we'll need for supporting this notebook in Flyte. What are the limitations and issues? I'll go over a small demo, and then I'll also, this is my first week installing Flyte. So I'll just go over some of the things that I learned and how things we can help in onboarding new folks when they actually start using Flyte. Yeah, that's my agenda. So as you know already that Flyte can't read Python code in notebooks. I'll quickly show you how exactly a notebook is structured. So I've written a sample notebook here. I'll just go over that, and there's the lab environment, which actually shows you how to edit a particular notebook. This one just is a Jupyter lab. Most of the folks use this interactive environment for editing their notebooks. Okay, so I have a sample Jupyter notebook here, which is just essentially doing, has some meta information along with very simple functions, which Python functions, which are just doing a whole square of a plus b. And this essentially is just calling two functions and returning the value. Now, in a Jupyter lab environment, you can actually run this particular piece of code. And if you have a main function, you can define the results of this, and it can return you the results over here. Now, most of the Jupyter notebooks are written this way. Now, if you want to support these sorts of notebooks for Flyte, essentially we want, this is a very basic notebook, but I will go over like what all things that the notebook author has to do in order to do this. But I'll also show you exactly how this notebook is structured. So if so if you can see, like it's mostly a JSON file with certain cell types which are marked down, and certain code sections which actually have an embedded code. Now, in order to have Flyte actually understand this, it has to be able to parse this out. Now, we're talking about like what all things we can use to actually get this information out. So one of the open source one which we found was Jupytex, and what it supports is basically conversion to Python, and it can convert a Python code back to a notebook. So that's a quite flexible way for people who are writing these notebooks to have this bidirectional support, and they can edit their within Flyte. We know that it reads from the Python file, so it can generate so the author can actually try to convert it to a Flyte task, and convert it to have all the data that currently is supported through from these functions. So for Flyte to understand, he has to convert those to protobufs. So those are some of the things that he needs to additionally do in order to have full Flyte support. And the one thing is with Jupyter, we found it was a very easy to use command line interface. If there are any additional ones, we can explore those as well. This was the very easiest for me to integrate in the first version. And like I mentioned, like what steps that the author would need to do is basically just modify the notebook to add the Flyte task or workflow annotation in the basic thing. If any custom transformer that he needs to add, if he has any particular data class that is not native, then he has to add transformers for those and then run serialize to convert those to protobufs and register those tasks in Flyte. And through the Flyte admin, then he can run those particular things. So I'll just go over a small demo of how exactly this can be done. And then I'll go over the limitations of these. So as I showed you from the Flyte task, this is not a Flyte task as of now. So a simple way that I can do it is basically just import Flytekit. Now, right now I'm running this file within a Python environment which has Flytekit. So that is the first thing that he will be required to do. And from this, you'll be importing task and workflow, right? And also, in order to have all the parameters actually be understood by Flyte, you need to have the types defined. In this particular case, this would be an output and an input being an int and the output being an int. So I've not read much. Whatever I've read from that, I'm inferring this is very much required for Flyte to understand the data types that it needs to understand when it is generating the workflow. And yeah, so essentially this is, used to Java. And yeah.
Used to most other languages, I would say, except for Go and Java, Go and Python now.
Yeah. So this would be something.
I'm going to change that, the previous import statement to from Flytekit import.
Oh, yeah.
Not the previous, sorry.
Other way around, yeah.
Again, Java.
Yeah.
Or Scala, rather.
There you go.
Yeah, and this is basically importing the workflow, and you have, it's essentially the same thing. Now you can even run it inside. Import.
I think you need a space or a blank line between square and sum.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. So essentially it's going to, so with the conversion to the Flytekit format, it again runs the same way in the interactive lab. Now what we're going to do is use this in our Flyte environment. And the way I have created one folder inside our recipes. This just has one init file for the Python. And I'm just going to copy this notebook over here. And what we're going to do is now register this particular. So I'm going to serialize this. So that's the first thing that we'll do is what this will do is basically pick up any notebooks that we have found in our cookbooks. Right now, I'm just working off the cookbooks, and it will generate a corresponding Python file. So you'll see over here, there's like it found one notebook and it converted that to a Python format. Currently, it uses like an option to convert it to a string space. I'll go over that. It's just how documentations would be generated easier. Now, if you see at the end, you have, okay, if I just grep for the protobuf files, wait, I think I did something, okay. Okay, I didn't save it. That's the one thing I missed. So over there, though it converted, because I didn't save it, it wasn't able to find any Flyte tasks. So I'll just copy over the Python notebook again over here. And I'll just serialize it.
So for people who are new, I think what's happening is the container is being built, which gets attached to every single task. There is some change happening in this also, where we are making this optional, but this is how it is today.
Right. Okay, so now if we try to grep for the protobuf files, we'll see those protobuf files have been generated. Now, the next step is to basically register this. And I'm running like local Flyte admin over here. And essentially, right now, I don't have that workflow here. Let's see that pretty soon. Sorry, this demo is taking too long. I think I should cut short this the next time I do it. I apologize for that.
I think you're done though, it's registered.
Yeah.
I think you can jump over.
Okay. Yeah. And so you'll see that the new workflow has been registered here. And so this is the whole square workflow that we saw, for which we had the notebook file. So I'll just give some parameters that, and yeah, it should launch. Takes a few minutes, but I'll just go over. So this thing should complete, and it should give the output similar way the other recipes have been written. So the main agenda was to see how exactly how we can use Jupyter Notebooks and can be used in Flyte, can be consumed over here. Some of the limitations that I see is currently we do not have automated conversions to the Flyte format. So the author has to actually come in and understand how, through annotations, he has to annotate his workflow, define how the data is going to be used. If there is any custom data classes he's using, he needs to define those custom data transformers. I'm still going through those, how exactly that can be used. So I'm trying to use another example, how exactly this can be made much simpler. And other things are like, I saw like issues with, once we generate the Python currently in locally, it doesn't allow you to run the same register again, because we have a conditional thing that unless you have committed something, you won't be able to run because this generates a Python file. So we want to find a solution where we keep the generated file in some other folder or have some GitHub to solve this. Other is very small, like string generated files. There are certain formatting issues once we convert from a notebook to a Python file. Other than that, I think this seems to work for most of the cases, like basic cases. Okay, going back, so we'll see that the two tasks have completed within that workflow of the sum and square. And if we go back to our workflow, this is also succeeded, which is a composite workflow. And if we look at our inputs and outputs, yeah, it's generated. So it successfully shows that we can convert any particular notebook and run it in Flyte using Jupyter. Some of the learnings I'll just quickly go over. That one thing was from the documentation, we have uses of Minikube and also Docker desktop for running it native Kubernetes cluster. So I found Minikube has had certain issues when I started running with certain OM issues and similar issues were with Docker desktop. So something that can clarify that in our documentation would be very helpful. Also with Minikube, I think I was seeing certain times like the mount point that we are using for the serialized sandbox, it used to not mount it correctly. And so the local file system won't be reflected when the container was run. So the register or the serialized won't get any output files from the protobuf output generated in the previous substage. This was very peculiar. It was intermittently happening. When I switched back to Docker desktop, this issue no longer happens. And so with all these, I think even like the workflows, even if it worked, even if it was able to register and generate the protobuf files, I found that the register will go through, but again, the workflow, when we try to run it, it would complain about pulling, it would have issues with pulling the images. And again, like I couldn't debug deep into it, but some networking issue over there. But with Docker desktop, I was not having any of these issues. So, I mean, if Docker desktop is going to be like a local environment where people will be using, I would suggest that people we clarify that one path instead of Minikube, so that people don't run into this issue. Other things were Flytekit using an older version with an incompatible Flyte admin. So I think that got resolved in a recent check-in. Converting pre-existing notebooks which use custom data class, I found it like a little non-trivial to implement. So I think I'll read more and work with you guys to understand how we can do this much simpler, and probably add some examples to help the community understand how to write these kinds of workflows as well. And there were certain Flyte Stacks recipes which were failing. I worked with Ketan on that. The one request I was looking for was running Flyte in debug mode and navigating logs. Couldn't find some documentation around it. And also, like if we are using Python environments, probably we can mention some place where all the versions of which Python to use, because I was jumping around with different versions to make things work. I had a latest Python version which doesn't have support from NumPy. So NumPy right now doesn't compile with the new 3.9 version that is out there. So I had to downgrade Python to 3.8. Yeah, so just like a small feedback, if you can mention all like these small nits around in our documentation can help the consumer of the doc much more.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's it from me. I think if you have any questions, I can answer now, or I'm available on the Slack also, like we can talk about it.
Thank you, Prafulla. This is like the first week. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Really
Yeah, thanks,
appreciate
Ketan.
the feedback. I think and this is exactly, sometimes when you're working on it and you know the problems, you forget to add the description for it. So this really helps. Thank you.
Cool.
I wanted to add one more thing. So what Prafulla demoed is converting an entire notebook which has workflows and tasks into Python equivalent file which gets registered with Flyte. We do have another method in Flyte, which is you can write every task can be a notebook, which uses this thing called as Papermill. It's an open source library, and it will be available in the new Flytekit API probably in the next alpha or beta release. I have already implemented it. It should be out, and that makes very generalized. It works for every task type. So, but both are different paradigms. One is a paradigm where the user writes end-to-end task in one workflow, and the other is a paradigm where you write end-to-end workflows in a notebook. And so I don't know which one is preferable. There are two camps outside in the world too. So this is an interesting. And there's a third solution, which is actually Cloud Pickle, which we are least in favor of because of brittleness. Okay. Thank you. I think for the new people, we definitely recommend look at flightcookbook.read the docs, and I'll put a link in the notes today. That has the examples, most of the examples. That's what Prafulla is using for running all the examples. They all run locally, and they also run remote. So please let us know if you find any problems. We want to use a example-based documentation approach going forward, because that's probably much better for users to follow. The last thing that we have, two things. One thing is we are doing a platform release today, 0.10.0. Like we're back from the holidays and we've been working through the holidays. We will get a platform release that brings some UI goodies and some backend improvements, including squishing some bugs, which you should see. And then the other thing is I'll be sharing the notes today later that has a planning sheet attached with it. Can you please add the planning, like if there are any things that, let me share my screen and I'll show the planning sheet quickly, and then we can go from there. 1 minute. So if you can see, this is the planning sheet. Oh, sorry, this is the planning sheet. It's pretty empty. Of course, if it loads. What I would like, if you have any task stories that you want Flyte to have, or we should think about, definitely add them, add a description. Select a priority that affects you or the company that you work for, or anywhere in the open source. And please let us know if you can help with them. I would appreciate a reason of why you think this is required. Your GitHub handle and a link to a GitHub issue if that exists, or create one. We will also be filling this out in the next week or so. So please fill this out. This should basically, hopefully we can have something by next meeting. And the idea is to get this filled out so that we can plan out for the year and we can have much more planned milestones for the year, just like we did like in the later half of last year. We want to continue doing that, even more planned, and so that you know exactly when your feature is going to land. And as we ramp up with more people, this would be also helpful in distributing workload. So that's the thing, and this is our meeting notes and meeting agenda. We'll share that. Any other questions? We can do a Q&A. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, I guess we're good. So definitely try action item, fill out the spreadsheet, please, and try out Flyte Cookbook and the new Flyte Alpha release. Cool.
Everybody.
All right, bye.
See everybody in a couple weeks. Good to see y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
But